Zimbabwean authorities have approved the use of an injectable drug that prevents the transmission of HIV. The United States and Australia are two other countries where the drug has been approved. There are hopes that this will offer more protection against those at highest risk of HIV infection.
Zimbabwean regulators approved cabotegravir in the hopes that it would provide much-needed protection to high-risk groups. The drug is initially administered in 2 doses set 4 weeks apart. Thereafter, it is administered at 8-week intervals. According to the WHO, studies observed a 79% decrease in HIV risk when compared to the pre-exposure prophylaxis oral regimen.
Pre-exposure prophylaxis, or PrEP as we call it, is a highly effective method of preventing HIV infection. Now, until fairly recently, PrEP was only available in tablet form and had to be taken once a day. And while taking a pill once a day is okay for some, for others it can really pose a challenge, especially those at high risk of HIV. Long-acting cabotegravir is an injectable form of PrEP and is seen as a game changer for that reason. And that's because it provides up to 2 months of protection from HIV from a single injection. This new innovation and highly effective option, we hope, will allow people who are at greater risk of HIV to use a technology that is most suitable for their particular needs and their situations. This includes adolescent girls and young women, and key populations such as men who have sex with men, sex workers, and in some cases, people who use drugs.
Experts say cabotegravir will give greater agency to those most at risk, such as women and girls, who made up 63% of new sub-Saharan infections last year.
In sub-Saharan Africa, 6 in 7 new HIV infections in adolescents are among girls and young women who are twice as likely to be living with HIV than males their age. With more options for pre-exposure prophylaxis, more people at risk of HIV infection will be empowered to take control of their health.
The drug is the second new HIV prevention measure approved by the Zimbabwean authorities this year, with the vaginal ring releasing the ARV drug dapivirine approved for use earlier this year.
Well, for a little bit more on this, we're now joined by Dr. Fundile Nyati, who's the Chief Executive of Proactive Health Solutions. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. So we heard in that report that this is a game changer. How do you see it?
Good evening, Peter, and good evening to all the viewers. I concur that it is indeed a game changer, more especially for those people who are, very much in a high risk to contract HIV. So yes, it's a major development. And I mean, when we look back to the last 20 years, in the early part of the 2000s, we were still struggling with, access to ARVs, with all the policies that were not really accelerating that process. And we now look 20 years later, we have now moved from taking too many tablets in a day to a point where one just takes 1 tablet, with a combination of ARVs, either for treatment or even for pre-exposure prophylaxis. So that's major that's major advance. So yes, I agree, it's a game changer, but it must be seen in the context of the other tools that we have in the toolbox to try and reduce the burden of HIV and reducing the number of people who are getting infected.
So if we look at the only other 2 countries that have approved the use of this drug, Australia and the United States, the thing that immediately jumps out for me is, can we afford it on this continent? Can Zimbabwe afford this? It certainly can't be cheap, I don't think.
Well, in terms of cost, and I think that's a very important question you just asked. In terms of cost, the estimates are 56,000 rands per jab. So that means in a 12-month period, that would work out to, about 6 times, right? So somewhere around, between 300 and 400,000 per person, Wow. So the cost is a big issue. Now, I think we need to also look at the fact that in Zimbabwe, they've got plus minus 1.3 million people who are living with HIV. Now, obviously, this, which is for pre-exposure prophylaxis, is to assist those who don't have the infection as yet who are at high risk. But in a context of South Africa, we have the highest load of HIV in the country, the biggest ARV program in the country. And so decisions that have got a serious cost need to be taken very, very carefully. But also, there are trials that are underway in South Africa, in terms of the use of this CAP-LA. And I think there's also application by our researchers to SAPRA for this injection to be, used in the South African context. So it's a game changer, but the cost is something that needs to be seriously thought of. And in fact, it mustn't be something that comes in to replace other things. The rollout of the oral pill for pre-exposure prophylaxis hasn't taken off, the way it was expected. But the sites where people can get these have now been expanded in South Africa. So we need to look at this injectable in the context of the other, solutions like that, so that we don't just shift our focus to this very expensive intervention, which is maybe something to be, given to the very much people in the high risk. And the issue of generics. There's been discussions that maybe there should be generics of this particular, injectable, so that more people can have access to it. But there hasn't been anything coming on that front. So the idea of pushing volumes at lower price, by the manufacturers, real healthcare, or at least, sub-licensing generics.
All right. If we take away cost from the equation, the first two injections are administered 4 weeks apart, and then one injection every 8 weeks. Compliance issues start to come up, and South Africans, we're sometimes not the best when it comes to compliance. We've seen it in the TB arena. Is this a concern?
Look, I think the biggest problem, the reason that, researchers in the HIV space have been working very hard to come up with much more convenient ways to ensure, compliance by patients. So if you look, like I said earlier, people used to take many tablets per day, sometimes 3 times. We're now at a point where just to take treatment to comply, it's one tablet that has got three active ingredients inside. Now, this is actually saying you don't have to worry about this thing on a daily basis that you must take something. You get an injectable once every 8 weeks. Now, so it is actually helping to address the problem of poor compliance, and so I actually think there will be even better uptake of this compared to any other solutions that we've had before, because you just get an injection. Ladies would be familiar with a contraceptive called Nyati, an injectable that was taken once every 8 weeks. So this is going to be similar to that, and quite a number of ladies actually prefer the use of Nyati. So this is not going to be that different, and the rollout has to be part of a broader reproductive healthcare system, of services where people get family planning as well. So what I'm trying to say is that this is actually a step up, something that should improve compliance. Yes, people are scared of injections, but they would rather have that injection once in 2 weeks, than to be taking treatment every day.
I suppose this might be a solution for maybe a married couple where one partner is HIV positive and the other isn't.
Definitely, because I think, that definitely, because that's a high-risk situation where one is positive and the other one is not positive. Although if one who is positive is taking their, oral tablets, even now, then they get to undetectable viral load levels, then the risk of infecting their partners, is actually very, very negligible. However, yes, this is another tool to actually assist people who are in those high-risk situations.
Are you worried that this might increase risky behavior when people start to think that they've got this fail-safe?
Yeah, human beings, sometimes, can really, something that is supposed to help them, actually misuse it. So the point I'm trying to make here is that with now much more effective ARVs, less side effects, much more convenience, all of that has now actually made people to take more risk. So the messages of ABC that used to be preached, about a decade or more ago, which are still relevant even today, we're seeing more people taking risks, and less focus on prevention. And now with tablets being part, or even injectables being part of prevention, we worry that, we must not let off, the awareness and encouraging people to still practice those ABC. It is something that has been seen in the recent years that the effectiveness of these ARV programs has led to people, slacking when it comes to matters of prevention.
All right. So bottom line, I guess, is the bottom line, the cost, but also that it must not be seen in isolation and that the current programs must continue and improved even.
Indeed. And I think just before we end off, I think it is important to also say, even though we're not the first country in Africa to now adopt this, Zimbabwe has beaten us there, but we were the first country to actually give the oral pre-exposure prophylactic drug, which is called Truvada. And in this particular research, South Africa and Brazil were the countries that were actually doing the trials. So our contribution as a country, our scientists, must be applauded because they played an active role to get things to the point where the FDA approved this in the US last year, and now we're waiting for SABC to approve the same here in South Africa.
Dr. Nyati, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much indeed for giving us some insights on this game-changing injection. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you to the listeners.
All right, there you have it. Dr. Fundile Nyati giving us his take on this new HIV prevention injectable. It's expensive though, that's the only drawback, but Zimbabwe has approved it for use alongside Australia and the United States, and those are the only countries in the world at this time.